Hey guys, we're using Poshmark and you should too. Do you have things that you don't wear anymore? Poshmark is seriously the easiest way to make room in your closet, make some cash, and also snag a bargain. It's the coolest reseller with the best brands like Lululemon, Nike, Reformation, and Gucci for up to 70% off. DJ Khaled has a closet and Serena Williams. Download the app today. Enter Podcast 10 when you sign up for $10 off your first purchase on Poshmark. Hey guys, we're using Poshmark and you should too. Do you have things that you don't wear anymore? Poshmark is seriously the easiest way to make room in your closet, make some cash, and also snag a bargain. It's the coolest reseller with the best brands like Lululemon, Nike, Reformation, and Gucci for up to 70% off. DJ Khaled has a closet and Serena Williams. Download the app today. Enter Podcast 10 when you sign up for $10 off your first purchase on Poshmark.
You're in the place where mysteries and the missing meet, where conspiracies lurk around every corner. Welcome to the Deep, Dark Truth.
Welcome back to the Deep, Dark Truth. I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
And welcome to the very first episode of our 3-part series revolving around mysteries in West Virginia.
How weirdly specific.
It is very specific, but today we're going to be finally discussing Mothman, who we just came back from visiting. But you should also be forewarned that some of the information will be purposefully left out of this episode, not for any reason of it not being related to Mothman, but because it links up with information in another episode of the series. In fact, Mothman, the Men in Black, and Indrid Cold, aka the Grinning Man, are so interlinked when it comes to researching this topic that it would have been a complete disservice to our listeners to try and cover just one of them, hence this 3-part series. But before we jump into it, let's take a minute to thank today's sponsor, HelloFresh.
Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh.
Do you feel like you are stuck in a dinner rut?
With HelloFresh, you can get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door.
Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make your home cooking easy, fun, and affordable.
You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less.
With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy.
All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity.
My favorite meal from HelloFresh is the bruschetta chicken, but I'm sure I have many more to try in the future.
They also have vegetarian options.
Go to the link in our show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit.
Coming soon to a mailbox near you.
And with that message from our sponsor, let's get started. Around 11 p.m. on November 15th, 1966, in a small town bordering the Ohio River, 2 couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Mary and Steve Millette, went for a joyride in Roger and Linda's 57 Chevy. What they saw that night would turn out to become one of the most infamous cryptids in North America.
And he's got a cute butt.
More on that later.
While on their drive, in the blackness surrounding the fields and homes of rural Virginia, near an old munitions/TNT plant, the couples witnessed 2 bright red circles, 2 inches around and 6 inches apart. Here is a passage from page 77 and 78 of the Mothman Prophecies describing that encounter. "What is it?" Mary Millette, a strikingly attractive brunette, cried from the back seat. The lights bobbed away from the building, and the startled foursome saw that they were attached to a huge animal. "It was shaped like a man, but bigger," Roger said later, "maybe 6.5 or 7 feet tall. It had big wings folded against its back. But it was those eyes that got us," Linda declared. "It had 2 big eyes like automobile reflectors. They were hypnotic," Roger continued. "For a moment we could only stare at it. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was grayish in color and walked on sturdy man-like legs. It turned slowly and shuffled toward the door of the generator plant, which was ajar and hanging off its hinges. "Let's get out of here," Steve yelled. Roger stepped on the gas, and they shot through the gates, spun onto the exit road, and headed for Route 62. Suddenly, they saw it, or another one like it, standing on a small hill near the road. As they hurtled past it, it spread its bat-like wings and turned off straight up into the air. My God, it's following us, the couple in the backseat cried. Roger swung onto 62 on two wheels. We were doing 100 miles an hour, Roger said, and that bird kept right up with us. It wasn't even flapping its wings. I could hear it making a sound, Mrs. Millette added. It squeaked like a big mouse. It followed us right to the city limit, Roger went on. Funny thing, we noticed a dead dog by the side of the road there.
Oh.
A big dog. But when we came back a few minutes later, the dog was gone.
Just got up. He's fine.
Terrified and confused, the couples went to the Mason County Courthouse to report what they saw in hopes that there was some answer that could be provided to them about its origin. They unloaded the tale of what they had witnessed during their nighttime excursions to Deputy Millard Halstead, who would later recount to John Keel, quote, I've known these kids all their lives. They've never been in any trouble, and they were really scared that night. I took them seriously, unquote.
Oh, it's one of those small towns. There's like 5 people.
The deputy even went so far as to follow them back to the site and observe and see if he could find any evidence. While he did not, in fact, see the creature for himself, he did start to experience a very high-pitched interference upon getting to the site that he had never experienced before. He described it as, quote, a loud garble like a record or tape recording being played at a very high speed, unquote.
I like that you fact-checked the speed of the Chevy.
I did. Because it sounds crazy. It sounds the craziest thing out of all of it to me. But anyways.
This is the most unbelievable. My suspension of disbelief is broken.
The terror of the couples and the strange interference was enough to convince him that something was amiss. But the Millettes and the Scarberrys would not be the last sighting of the creature. Not even close. Over the course of the next 13 months, there would be estimated to be over 100 sightings. That is, until December 15th of 1967, when they abruptly came to an end on the very day when the Silver Bridge connecting Gallipolis, Ohio, and Point Pleasant, West Virginia collapsed, resulting in the deaths of 46 people, leading many to believe that the Mothman was an omen or a prophecy for the tragedy that would unfold, trying to warn the people of Point Pleasant of ill tidings.
Not that I don't agree that this is the correct interpretation, but I don't think they were all like he was trying to warn it. I think most of them think he did it. That's slander, but...
We don't support what you're saying, so...
Fake news.
That is not the official Deep Dark Truth stance on Mothman.
I agree.
He is a helper, not a hinderer. For decades on, Point Pleasant, West Virginia would be enshrouded in whispers and suspicion surrounding the sightings of this beastly figure, who would become indivisible from the storied history of the town and the tragedy that took place on December 15th, 1967. The date after the sighting by the original 4, they were interviewed when the head sheriff called a press conference, which included reporter Mary Heyer, another figurehead who has become inseparable from the mythos of the case. The most prominent result of the press conference was that the figure was finally given a name, due to the very popular Batman spin-off airing at the time starring Adam West, and as pop culture influences all forms of media, our favorite cryptid was thus dubbed Mothman, a derivative of the killer moth. In the 1980s, there would be an actual Mothman added to the Watchmen comics.
Good for him.
But it's one of those things where that comic was inspired by Mothman, which was inspired by a previous comic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adam West.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about John Keel, the journalist and ufologist behind the Mothman prophecies. He will be mentioned many times throughout this series. The Mothman prophecies has been subtitled a few different things, including The Mothman Prophecies, an investigation into the mysterious American visits of the infamous feathery Garuda. The term Garuda derives from an ancient Hindu mythology where Garuda is the king of the birds and is a vehicle of the god Vishnu. It was also at one point titled Visitors from Space, the astonishing true story of the Mothman prophecies, and lately, in the newest editions, it is just referred to as the Mothman prophecies, as everyone knows what that is, and that's what everyone was calling it anyway.
They're both a mouthful. It seemed silly in the first place. These people are not good at their branding.
You could say that John Keel stumbled into Mothman while looking for evidence of UFOs and aliens.
You could say that.
A good portion of the Mothman prophecies has to do with just that, including tales of Indrid Cold and other things that will be touched on later in the series.
How far away from the bridge was the couples sighting Mothman for the first time? And was that the first official sighting?
That is the first official sighting of Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I want to be very specific about that. It's about 8 miles from the Point Pleasant Center.
So they were in a city next to Point Pleasant?
No, it's right past Point Pleasant High School. Let's see if this is...
They were going for a joyride in 1966.
It's still in Point Pleasant.
So it was in the city. Okay.
City's a strong term.
You were there. The city is 6 by 6 blocks, but then everything else around it is still Point Pleasant. It's just rural.
Right. Gotcha.
So it's just not near the bridge. You go across the bridge and you go into the city from the bridge, and this is more in the rural area. So it's about 8-ish miles from where the city center is to this TNT plant.
So after they reported it, they went back and saw that the dog was not there?
I think they drove by it earlier before Mothman, and then on their way back running from Mothman.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah, it isn't very specific because it could also be them coming back with the sheriff, right? The deputy sheriff, because they go back to the, quote unquote scene.
That's what I was picturing. Okay.
Because John was so interested in UFOs, this was an enormous contributing factor to who did and did not take the Mothman prophecies seriously, as many viewed his accounts tainted on account of him being interested in fringe sciences. But in his defense, he seemed more than willing to deny superstitions, UFOs, and other theories if he didn't feel that the science could at some point support it, even if it couldn't necessarily now. Right. If he viewed something as being absolutely scientifically impossible versus we're not capable of it yet. That's the only way I could describe it. But this is what he had to say. Quote, I abandoned the extraterrestrial hypothesis in 1967 when my own field investigations disclosed an astonishing overlap between psychic phenomena and UFOs. The objects and apparitions do not necessarily originate on another planet and may not even exist as permanent constructions of matter. It is more likely that we see what we want to see and interpret such visions according to our contemporary beliefs, unquote.
This is such a melodramatic sentence right here.
Yeah. John Keel also might have popularized Mothman and people's knowledge of Mothman, but he wasn't the first to print about the sightings of Mothman. In fact, Gray Barker wrote in They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers a little bit about Mothman, and it contributed to his popularity. I don't want to say it's, but also why are all cryptids his? Or
you know
him?
Why.
But why are guitars and boats? Nessie's a girl, but all of the rest of them. Anyways, Gray Barker included Mothman in his book They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, which was published prior. An angel, a demon, a curse laid by the murdered Chief Cornstalk, an omen, a prophet. It's unknown, but we do know that Mothman wasn't the first of his kind. He's likened to other similar creatures and religious figures from across the globe, including the Owlman, the Thunderbird of Native American culture, the Garuda that we talked about of the Hindu religion, and 2 different examples from Shawnee lore, just to name a few.
So there could be more Mothman, but normally people don't talk about that. They suggested it could have been a second one. Like that night, that first night with the couples.
Or any of the 100 other sightings that happened over the next 13 months. Necessarily wouldn't have to be the same Mothman.
Were there any sightings of Mothman on the day that the bridge collapsed?
I don't remember where I read it, but so it was like, seen near the bridge on that day.
Saving starts with internet and wireless from Xfinity. Because when you get Xfinity internet and add mobile, you can save up to $400 a year on wireless. Enjoy fast, reliable internet at home and nationwide 5G on the go, included at no extra cost. Get Xfinity internet and mobile together and ask how to get an eligible 5G phone on us. And for a limited time, $300 back. Don't miss out. Go to Xfinity.com/start saving. Call 1-800-XFINITY or visit a store today. Restrictions apply. Savings based on optimized pricing. Actual savings may vary.
Another day, another unknown. It could bring your biggest order yet, or a new cyber threat. Whatever happens, Comcast Business will keep you ready with a network that can deliver gig speeds to the most businesses. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Get started with a great offer from Comcast Business. And for a limited time, ask how to get a $650 prepaid card with a qualifying bundle when you buy online. Call 1-800-501-6000 or go to ComcastBusiness.com to learn more. Prepaid card offer ends 9/21/21. Call or go online for details.
I thought I read something about it in the museum.
They saw him smacking it down with his giant wings.
So there allegedly was a final sighting by the bridge before it collapsed. But I don't have the details of it because people tend to focus on the first accounts when they write articles and such about it. And I don't have it written down in my notes because I did the same thing.
It's interesting how fast it took off. Like in 2016, they started the Mothman wiki, and 5 months after that, there was over 100 articles.
They had decades of
articles
to be able to input into.
After the fact, it became so mainstream.
I mean, even in just that 1 year,
right?
It's notable how much it spread because it's 1966 and 7.
Right.
It's not, the media is not what it is today.
Right.
But also, the town is 5 people, and 4 of them saw it. So,
but specifically after the bridge, there wasn't any or very few reportings of Mothman.
Afterwards, it stopped in Point Pleasant.
Yes,
right.
Afterwards, it stopped in Point Pleasant.
I'm also reading here that that couple was the second sighting. It wasn't the first.
So, the couples weren't the first sighting, but they were the first reported sighting. Allegedly, a few days prior, some gravediggers saw the creature, but because the couples went to the authorities and started this, what could only be described as a media circus, considering there was a press conference, they came forward after.
Right.
So while that's the first sighting, the first reported sighting is kind of where we see the beginning of the origin story, simply because that's when they got it out into the world and people were able to hear about it. The authorities were involved and somebody else was told versus somebody coming later and saying, oh, I've seen that.
Right.
Retroactively having seen it.
Right.
Different than being the first to report it.
Yeah, and it's not to say that their sighting doesn't necessarily mean as much. It's that they probably never would have came forward if it wasn't for the two couples going to the sheriff's department and people hearing about it. And you hear that a lot with cryptids. That's exactly what happened with the Michigan Dog Man. Like, it started as a joke by a radio DJ, and then everyone called in and was like, no, that's an actual thing. Like, that's an actual thing that I've seen.
Totally.
It's not a joke. Okay, let's talk about some of the theories about who Mothman was or is and what his purpose was. Because since the Mothman sightings, the original, what we would call the Point Pleasant sightings, there's been sightings before many disasters, including 9/11, a bridge collapse in Minnesota, the Chernobyl disaster.
He gets around. They get around. The species gets around.
And this was after the bridge collapse.
And this is years after. So, like 9/11, obviously September 11th, 2001.
What?
I don't think I have to tell anybody that. But the Minnesota bridge collapse, also known as the I-35 bridge collapse, happened in 2007. The Chernobyl disaster happened on April 26, 1986. Also before a swine flu outbreak in Mexico in 2009.
Well, that's just rude. That's not his style at all.
There was claims to have seen them. And in every one of these instances, it wasn't just one or two people that claimed to have seen a Mothman-like creature. It was multiple accounts. Not necessarily the possible 100 plus of the Point Pleasant original sightings, but enough to where it's documented. So what do people theorize Mothman's purpose to be? And the first is obviously that Mothman is a harbinger or an omen of these bad circumstances that are going to befall people who see them or the surrounding area where he is sighted. Some also believe that Mothman, or rather the disaster of the Silver Bridge, isn't necessarily Mothman related, but in fact is set upon from a curse from Chief Cornstalk, a Shawnee chief.
So we're back to the racism?
Yes.
Oh, good.
There are a lot of tragedies that have been blamed on this curse, starting from 1907, where the worst coal mine disaster at the time took place in Monongah, West Virginia. Throughout West Virginian history, there's been all of these different things, including tornadoes, that have been attributed to the curse. Chief Cornstalk was murdered.
Shocking. A Native American leader murdered by the American government or anyone in the United States? Impossible.
1 second. There's like 4 different accounts of how this went down. Chief Cornstalk was murdered while being held by soldiers. When some of the soldiers were murdered by other Native American tribes, they took their retribution out on Chief Cornstalk and murdered him. According to legend, when he died, he told his would-be murderers, quote, "I was the borderman's friend. Many times I have saved him and his people from harm. I have never warred with you, but only to protect our wigwams and lands. I refuse to join your pale-face enemies with the redcoats. I came to the fort as your friend, and you have murdered me. You have murdered by my side my young son. For this, may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this land. May it be blighted by nature. May it even be blighted in its hopes. May the strength of its peoples be paralyzed by the stain of our blood." Unquote.
Good for him.
So if that's true, they deserved it. But I strongly doubt that it had anything to do with Mothman, because as we all know, Mothman is friend.
I like to think Mothman isn't a racist murderer. Not that he killed the chief, but that he's, like, in on it.
Not only that, but the chief's son was murdered before him. So how absolutely horrifying.
Was Chief Cornstalk one of the monument things that was there at Point Pleasant when we went to visit?
Ooh, that's a good question. There was.
I think it's on the flood wall that we visited, yes.
It is. So there is a statue of Chief Cornstalk in Point Pleasant.
I knew I read
They
it.
have a park there that has a bunch of different statues, and Chief Cornstalk is included among those
on
statues.
The flood walls. They did artwork on the flood walls and had statues in front of them.
Other accounts of Mothman described him as an angel, also as a demon. And so, for the purposes of this series, going forward, how are we viewing Mothman?
Well, there's also the theories that it's just a giant bird of prey.
That's very true.
That's something that I've read a lot too, that it could just be a giant owl.
It's a big fucking owl.
I've also heard heron.
Pterodactyl.
For the purposes of this specific series, we're going with pterodactyl.
It's an option. It's on the table.
A friendly pterodactyl. Your friendly neighborhood pterodactyl Mothman.
Okay, but here's a question. When they described, one of the descriptions that you read out, it described the wings as bat-like. And the name Mothman was inspired by one of the villains in Batman. Why the fuck didn't he get a bat-themed name?
It's very true. And I have no answer for you except for that original copywriter that titles the article decided. And it caught on like wildfire.
Damn you, that person!
Do you want renaming Mothman to be part of this series? Let's workshop this.
It's just not a good name for any description of him. He doesn't sound very mothy. He just has wings.
I think Batman was very taken, and so they took something from Batman.
But something in reference to the bat. The haunting bat, the bat monster. Literally stick the word bat on anything.
You make solid points.
Bat sells better than moth does. Clearly it's a pterodactyl.
So for the purposes of the series, we are going to view Mothman as a friendly creature versus a curse or a demon. So it could be a prophet or it could be an omen. It could be either of those things. But Mothman isn't taking part in the destruction.
Trying to stop it, coming to warn us of imminent doom, and thus bringing it upon us.
It was sighted around AT&T Zone, Hidden Genetics, Super Creature.
Interesting that you say that. Because that specific TNT site, during World War II, that's when this TNT plant was mostly in commission. And that area still exists today. There's a bunch of different things in that surrounding area. There's these kind of like igloos. I don't know how else to explain them. They are literally called the igloos. Like if you were to Google it, there's a whole parking lot to go see them. They're bunkers, but the way that the tops of them look, because it was basically abandoned after the war. Some of it got converted into this wildlife management area, and there's also a landfill, and basically it's like this weird multi-use space that they've tried to create out of something that was abandoned.
Oh, some of them look like hobbit holes.
Some of them do look like hobbit holes. Because they were making TNT and other type of ammo, there was a lot of byproducts created in that, and that land surrounding is basically poisoned.
Correct.
And so that could also lead some substance, if we're going by Futurama standards, to how Mothman came to be, not just through government experimentation, but also through just genetic mutation over time.
Hallucinations caused by nuclear whatever.
You're not wrong, although we can say that a lot of the sightings, because if you're drawing a giant circle around Point Pleasant and even like neighboring towns that are just outside Point Pleasant, you would have to have particularly strong winds to be able to, especially if it's that the earth itself is poisoned versus having a lot of toxic fumes still existing, to be able to go in like a 20-mile radius surrounding this town. Because remember, the TNT is like 8 miles from the actual like city center-ish of Point Pleasant.
So I'm reading something that says genetic manipulation and animal splicing were very common during World War II. There's records of these experiments from the Nazis, the Soviets, and even the US.
What? The United States involved in genetic engineering? Just all these shockers happening today.
The biggest takeaway with this theory is that it is a quarantine and dangerous area, but that the sightings of Mothman didn't stop until the military got involved and researched and quarantined the entire TNT area.
Mothman Black.
Very interesting.
That's the big, like, connection as to why this is a valuable, like, kind of theory into describing Mothman.
While interviewing witnesses and researching his book, Keel encountered many witnesses who claimed to have been visited by men in black clothing, driving brand new cars that seemed extremely out of place in the area. But by the end of his time spent in Point Pleasant, Keel alleged that he had been visited by them as well and described them as, quote, demonic supernaturals, unquote. He also described them as having dark skin and or exotic facial features, which I'm not sure if that is just underlying racism, the kind that's like, this is rural West Virginia and we haven't seen anyone with darker skin here.
Since we murdered Chief Cornstalk.
In the context of having like darker skin, on many occasions describes it as tanned skin versus dark skin. So that's something we'll get into when we talk about Men in Black more. While these were not the first accounts of the so-called Men in Black, Keel would be the first to coin the term by their initialism, the MIB.
You're welcome, Will Smith.
Over the next 2 episodes, we are going to continue to talk about Mothman in relation to, is Mothman an alien? And why were these Men in Black involved if Mothman was just a hallucination or a hoax? How does the Men in Black come into play?
Is Will Smith actually a Mothman? Tune in next week to find out.
Until next time, I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
Obviously, Will Smith is a moth.
You just listened to the Deep Dark Truth Podcast. See you next time. And remember, your local cryptids want to meet you.
Savings starts with Xfinity. Get a great price on Xfinity Internet. Plus, ask how to get an eligible 5G phone on us. And for a limited time, $300 back when you add Xfinity Mobile. Go to Xfinity.com/start saving. Call 1-800-XFINITY or visit a store today. Restrictions apply.
Another day, another unknown. It could bring your biggest order yet, or a new cyber threat. Whatever happens, Comcast Business will keep you ready with a network that can deliver gig speeds to the most businesses. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Get started with a great offer from Comcast Business. And for a limited time, ask how to get a $650 prepaid card with a qualifying bundle when you buy online. Call 1-800-501-6000 or go to ComcastBusiness.com to learn more. Prepaid card offer ends 9/21/21. Call or go online for details.